Hello. So welcome to the MySQL video. So in this video, I'll be focusing on MySQL, right? On what MySQL is all about. So basically, what is um what is MySQL about? MySQL is actually it's an open source relational database management system, right? So um what is the database management system? Allows you to be able to manage databases, right? So this is how MySQL works. MySQL handles data of websites, right? So front enders do with everything you see. Basically, back enders to do with managing people's data and all of that. Where data is stored and all that. So a programming language like PHP handles the logic behind trying to get access to those data, checking if the data exists or not, right? From the server, right? From the back end. But there needs a place. There has to be a place where the data is stored, right? It's just like when you have an accountant in a company and you tell the accountant, hey, I want you to bring up my accounting, the records of the company. I want to see the expenses we made last month. So she goes or he goes and he starts going through all the records and he's bringing them or a particular record. So those records are where those data was stored, but the accountant can be said to be the PHP, right? That gets access to those records, the script. Then the data is what the PHP is actually getting access to. You understand? So that's how it works. So basically, um, and this is how MySQL handles database, right? So there's database, and a database is a collection of tables, right? So what is a table is made up of rows and columns, right? And that's how it's stored. So a database will have a collection of tables, and then the tables are made up of rows and columns where you have records, right? And we will see all of that. So let's quickly go there to access it. So I'll be accessing it from localhost. So let's open our XAMPP, right? So from the previous video, you should already have XAMPP installed, XAMPP VS Code, and you should have some basic understanding, of PHP, right? Not because we're going to write PHP here first, but at least that would help to bridge that gap, and it's going to help understanding certain things what we want to build the actual project, right? So we start Apache, we start MySQL, right? And then so when we go to localhost/php my admin, right? And we click on it. So you have this, right? So it kind of like tells us everything you have concerning our database and all of that, right? It has everything that so you can see that. And then if we want to actually click on if we want to click on let's create a new database. So when we click new, you see database name, right? So let's put a name. Let's say okay, I already have a backend tutorial there. Um, all right. So let's drop this table actually. Drop database backend tutorial. And you don't actually have to worry about this. We're going to explain all of that, but just want to drop that so that will create it. Okay. So when we create the database, right? So if we're creating a new database, we click on this new and then we have the backend. So I want to create a backend backend tutorial, and I click on create. I put the database name and I create database. So you can see now that it's giving me the opportunity to actually create an opportunity to actually create a table, right? With the table name. So how if I decide I actually want to create a table using this option, I could do that, right? By simply doing what? I just put the table name. So let's just actually have a user's table, and I put create number of columns 4, and I put create, right? You can see that it's giving me the option to select the data type, and its value and all those things, right? So this can actually be used to create a table, but in this tutorial we'll be sticking more to entering it through using the SQL section, right? So we're going to be writing code to SQL code to be able to manipulate the database, right? So that's what I want to actually focus on. I'm going to focus on this video. So to do that, when we click here, we click on SQL right? So let's quickly write an SQL code. So if I want to create a table, right? If I actually want to create a table on on if I want to create a table on MySQL, I write the code. But before I do that, let me quickly show you something. So you can see here when we click users, right? So we can see that this is a table, this is a database. If we click on this particular, right, you can see this, right? And when we click on users, we can actually see the table is made up of rows, right, and columns, right? So that's how it works, right? So let's come back here and let's enter SQL. So I'm going to create a new table, right? And then I'm creating that table. And if I want to create a table on SQL, how do I create a table? I'll first write the create table, and I give the table a name. So I want to create a users table, right? And I have this opening, closing, yes, and I put a semicolon at the end, yeah. So I have a users table I want to create. So before you basically start creating tables in MySQL database, right, you should like already know what information the table is going to have, the rows, right, the columns you want it to have. You at least that's how it's kind of like works. You can actually do include more columns later, but you're supposed to have like a basic structure that you want first. So in this case, we just want our table, right? We want our database, the table, users table, to have basically what, for the sake of this video, let's just make it have, 3 columns, right? So it's going to have an ID, it's going to have a name, and it's going to have email. And what is an ID, right? So in database, right, in MySQL, every single row should have like a primary key that it can be used to identify, like it's a unique number to it, like it's every row has that number to it, right? Like no other row has that number. Like if you click on this now, yes, I want the changes to go. If you click on this, you can see that there's ID here has 1, 3, and 4, right? So you can see all of these here, right? That's exactly how it is. So that this every single row here has a unique, like it's that ID is primary to it, right? No other row will have the same ID. And even if you should delete one of these records and a new record is inserted, instead of the new one, the new record now would have 5, right? So even if this is deleted, instead of it to have 4, it will have 5, because it's showing to say that it's auto increments, right? To show that this particular user has this ID, and it shows you that although the total number of records here, rows here, the total number of rows here are basically just 3, but you can see the ID here is 4. So that's because some records have been deleted before, right? So in essence, ID should be there, and it should be the primary key that you can easily use to identify that particular record, and it should be auto incrementing, right? So that each time a new record is entered, it will give it a new value. So how is that going to be done? Let's put it on SQL now. So by the time we put create table users, right? So I'm trying to create users table, and we put this, right? So we create the ID, that is the name of the column, right? It's just the name of the column, and we're going to specify the type. We're going to say it's of type integer, and we're going to give it auto increment, right? Because we want it to increment automatically each time a new record is entered, and we're going to give it the primary key that we talked about, right? So that solves that. So we're going to create another column name, and this is supposed to store the person's name, so to say, right? And then we would say varchar, right? So what is varchar? Varchar is this is how I like to explain things to the very basic level. So varchar, you can easily see varchars are used to store strings, right? Names, basically strings, right? Strings you can use to actually store them. Like in this case, the person's name, So varchar, and we give it a length, right? So in this case, let's give it a length of 50 for the sake of this video, right? And then put a comma, then we enter the email. So the email is also going to be of type varchar, right? And let's put 255. But yeah, there's something I want to include, right? Have you ever been to a website and you try to put your email address to create an account and it tells you this email is already taken by another user, you know? So even if the records have a primary key, you can still give unique to a particular column, right? So that column will be unique. What it means is that even if there's a primary key column, like each row can have unique, so to say. So like an email address, you can't have more than one email, like 2 rows with the same email address, right, in the table, in the database. So to do that, if we just put unique, right, what it means is that it's going to set that. But here there's something we want to also include, right? Then let's look at this. Unexpected beginning of statement. All right, let's just finish up first. So, and then let's look at something again. There's something else we want to do, right? So I want to specify not null. And why am I specifying not null? Because I want that record, that particular column to be imputed, right? It cannot be null. The producer must supply that particular column, right, where you're entering a new record. So if you're trying to impute a new record, so you will put the person's email name and you put the person's email. They can't be null. So the same thing is going to be said about this. And then in this case here, sorry, this primary key is like this, right? So that solved that issue. So by the time we actually run this go, right, you will see what will happen. You can see that we now have a new users table here, right? And you can see the users, right? It's empty, there's nothing there, right? So let's actually insert some records for the user, right? So let's insert a record, right? So so if you want to insert a new record, how do we do that? We use the insert, right? Insert, this is how I write it. Insert into the table name, users, right? And then when we put insert into users, we specify the columns we want to put, right? So we'll say name and email, right? And then we'll now say what values do you want to supply? Values, and we say, let's just put John Doe, and then we put the email John. Let's just put a random email. Just say John Doe at gnc.xyz, right? And then we close that, right? So the moment we run this, see what happens. You can see one row inserted, right? So when we click browse and we click users, you can see that we have that record there. So it has inserted this new row, right? So what if we want to actually update this particular user's information, say the person's name, right? So how do we do that? We will come to SQL, right? And then we use the update table name, users, and what do we want to set? We want to set the name, right? Let's set name, right? So we'll set name now to John Michael, and we say, right, where the email, I can't even remember the email we put, but we can say let me just go back and get that email. Yes, before we continue, please. So I'll just copy all of this. Just copy it and come back here, enter it again. So I would say update users, set email. Let's set the name John Michael, where the email, right? So I want to change that name where the person's email is actually equal to this, right? And then this is what happens. And we hit go, you can see one row affected, notifying you that it has actually updated, right? So when we come here, we can see it's John Michael right now. So let's actually try to enter a new record with this same email, and let's see what happens. Because we can see if you click structure, you will notice that there's a key here identifying that, okay, to give you the idea of, that stuff I explained. And then we have this here primary key. So let's actually, you can see the auto increment. So let's actually go there and try and enter a new user with the same email. So we would say insert into users. I would say name. I would say email. Values. What values are we setting? Right. So let's set Frank, James, and then let's put that same email, right? Let's put the same email and let's see what happens. I'm just going to copy all of this, right? And let's see. You can see insert into duplicate entry the email for key email. So it's not allowing us to do that because the email, somebody with that email already exists in the database, right? So, but let's actually change this email, right? So let us let's put Frank James, right? And we put go, and you can see one row affected, right? So it has automatically done that. You can see that it's here, right? Good. So that has been done. Then what is the next step, right? Let's actually delete a user, right? So let's delete a user. So I'll just copy this email, right? Just copy it. Let's say I want to delete that particular user, and I'll just say delete from users. That's how it is, where email, the column name, is equal to this. And it's going to give me a prompt. It's going to say, do you really want to delete that? And I'll say, okay. So one row deleted, so it has deleted it. So when I click browse, you can actually see that it has deleted. So basically, there are various data types in MySQL. So there's integer, there's varchar, date. Well, for the sake of this video, we're sticking to like these data types, to explain them. So then that is it for this video. Thank you for your time. Do have a wonderful day.